mangroves. Although I'm sure the other habitats in the coastal area are also affected. But usually, the mangroves will always be the most visibly affected in times of an oil spill. Now, my talk basically will be composed of the following things. Sharing also what we have seen from the effects of the oil spill in Guimaras that happened in 2006. So Alright, so we talk about the fate of the marine oil spill. So when we talk about predicting impacts of the oil spill, we look at it in terms of the kind of oil that was spilled. So it will definitely depend on the type of oil. Alright, basically, we have two types of oil. One is what we call the so-called non-persistent oil. The other one is what we call as the persistent oil. Well, obviously, these are not too difficult words to understand, but let me explain further. When we speak of kanang mga non-persistent, well, obviously, they are the ones that do not normally persist in the sea. In other words, they disappear rapidly because of evaporation. They are easily dispersed and dissipated by natural wave action, but they pose a significant fire hazard and explosion when accidentally ignited. And then they are a major public health concern if they occur in areas where it is heavily populated. And then they may cause significant environmental hazards due to the high concentration of the toxic components. But the same toxic components will evaporate rapidly, thereby making the effect more localized. It's not as widespread as with the other type of the oils. Next, we go to the persistent. Now, when we speak of the persistent, well, obviously, they are those that are, they are the heavy crudes, they have the heavy fuel. Normally, they will form what we call chocolate mousse. Perhaps you know, daghan kayo din mga HRM students, you know what a chocolate mousse is, alright? So, kanang oil and nag-mix in emulsion with water, it forms that kind of a consistency which is similar to the chocolate mousse. And they contain the greater proportion of the non-volatile. Unsa man yung non-volatile? These are the non-easily evaporating materials or component of the oil. And they have a high viscosity. Alright. Now, according to the American to NOAA, they have classified the persistence of oil according to this. If you look at the crudes, the heavy crudes, they could persist for months. But for the heavy distillates, they could persist for years. They are persistent, in other words. But in the case of the heavy oil, many, like for example, the bunker oil, though it is persistent, but generally it is less toxic than the diesel or gasoline. They are more persistent and visually also. Alright, it is a fact already in the familiar subject that the marine environment is subject to many introduction of pollutants, organic pollutants coming from many sources, either deliberate or accidental introduction. I think all of you is familiar with this slide here. Can you recognize this? Which part of Cordova is this? Is this Cordova? Have you been to this area? Wala? Oh, you have a very beautiful mangrove here. These are the examples of what I call as the overwash type of mangroves, which is not common in Guimaras. What we have in Guimaras there are the fringing type. Alright, now, if you look at our coastal ecosystem, there are three interrelated, interconnected habitats. Composed of one, we have the mangroves near the land side. Then next to that will be the seagrasses. Then we have your coral reefs. All of these are present in Cordova. Alright? Now, in other words, if they're present They are also the area for oil contamination. So all of these areas now have been affected by the oil spill. Okay. Now, each of these habitat in the coastal area has a very specific and important function. In certain areas, you only have the mangrove. Some will have the seagrass, but no coral reef immediately. But some will have no mangrove, only seagrass and coral reef. And these are all interrelated. So for example, if you remove the mangroves here, you affect the system here because of the reduction of the nutrients that go here and the nutrients that move from here to here. And if you remove also this one, there is no protection to the two other habitats. So they are very interrelated and highly sensitive ecosystem. That is why in the event of an oil spill, the very first thing also among the many important items we check is the presence of what we call different kinds of habitats, because that will also guide us in our response. Next. All right. What is a mangrove now? All right. What's the common name of mangrove here? Anong po sa'yo? Mangrove. All right. Would you know that the Philippines has 35 species of true mangroves? Our mangrove is composed of what we call salt-tolerant plants. Salt-tolerant sila that grow in sheltered coasts, estuaries, and deltas in tropical and subtropical regions. They prefer usually ganitong klase. But you can have also, of course, the fringing type where there is minimal wave action. Alright? Next. Mangroves play an important role in our coastal ecosystem. Why? They provide us with a lot of nutrients coming from these fallen leaves. Kinsan kita ni mga kain dahon na otherwise other people would look at this as basura. In fact, during the early days, they look at the mangroves as basurahan only. So people start to dump all their garbage. No? Kamu dire, glabay yung basura nila dire. No? Kini dili ni sa basura. This is normal, this is natural. Say kung wala yung leaves ani, productivity offshore will be reduced. Wala kita fisheries. Kasi yung tawag ng fisheries, fishery resources. Daghan kayong economically important resources. So, the mangrove serves as the base of the marine ecological food chain. If you remove the mangroves, you remove all the other components of the food chain. And who will suffer? Kita, mag-suffer good ng reduction. Alright, what's the behavior of mangroves, of oil in a mangrove? Okay, here. In this illustration, you can see that we have dead mangroves here. If you look at the profile, marine profile niya, alright? So when the oil arrives during high tide, papasok na siya, alright? And then when the tide recedes, a portion of that oil remains at the bottom, alright? If you have this kind of depression, but if there is the strait here, in all probability, the oiling will only be somewhere here. But if you have a depression like this, there's a high tendency that oil mag-stay dire and it will cause the death of the mangroves. Explaining why in certain areas, dead mangroves are found inside the mangrove area, not outside. Alright, next. So, our marine ecosystem is subjected to this number one oil pollutant source, which is crude oil. In the amount of around this number of 1.7 to 8.8 times 10 to the 6 tons of oil being discharged in our waters. Now, every spill is different. Walay duhang spill na the same. Every spill is a different story. Alright? Different siya because they differ in terms of, one, difference in terms of the amount and the type of oil spill. Second, they are different in terms of the initial physical and chemical characteristics of the oil. They're also different in terms of the prevailing climatic conditions. Now, in the case of the Philippines, most of the spills occurred in relatively, one is in calm water, one is not in calm water. But many of the accidents that happen usually have really bad weather. Next is, they are different also whether the oil remains at the sea or is already washed ashore. So different responses are required for different types of oil spill. Now, example here, Tasman Spirit, which running around off the coast of Karachi in 2003. It carried 30,000 tons of oil. What was interesting about the spill is that it was very close to a highly populated area. Alright? Ganito yung spill nila. Ito yung population of Karachi. Another one, we have another popular spill, Prestige, which sunk off the coast of Portugal, carrying 60,000 tons of oil. And with this amount, it was able to contaminate this area a total of 3,000 kilometers from ground zero. From the coast of Portugal all the way to France here, all contaminated. How does Cordova fare in terms of this? Little only. In the Philippines, the Philippine Coast Guard, being the lead agency in monitoring oil spills, has documented these cases of oil spill. The most recent, for the last 10 years, are significant. One is in Semirara Island. This is the very first oil spill of major scale that I was involved in the Philippines. And the second one was in Guimaras, and now this is my third oil spill in the Philippines. Next. The backgrounder for the spill in Semirara, it was due to the ruptured power barge tanks numbers 3 and 4 of Napocor, power barge number 6. So it occurred in December 8:45 a.m. kasi may bagyo. Nanago itong ang barge at the back of the Semirara Island, and not knowing na nagkakain bahura or corals, it rammed the corals, causing the rupture of the tanker. Alright, the volume of oil here is around 364,120 liters, according to the Philippine Coast Guard. Here, how much ang oil? Mga 120,000 maximum. Ano siya? Alright. Sorry, next. This is the location of Semirara Island, a relatively pristine island in the Philippines. Very pristine, but recently has been raped several times because of exploration of oil, of coal rather. This is our source of coal for the Philippines that runs our electricity. Low grade, however. Next. So this is where the ground zero was. Okay. So the oil, this is the culprit. This is the rupture of the bottom here. Power barge. Okay. Next. And good, it was immediately removed from the site by the Philippine Coast Guard. But we can see already the damage caused with the spill. Next, please. So we can see the sheen here. This is the sheen, alright, of the oil coming from this barge. Alright, so the oil moved in a southwest direction. Okay, there. And you can see in the following animation, you can see how the oil moved into and collected into the Caibelo Cove. It's an influence both of wind direction and current. Luckily, they're only collected and confined in this particular area. This is the view of the Caibelo Cove. Notice the very pristine mangroves here. These are more than 100 years old. Very large trees. Okay, there's another one area here. Take note, walang clearing dito. Maganda, intact yung mangroves. Alright, next please. Alright, so we studied the impact here and we found out that it was this area that was heavily oiled, around 23 hectares. So we did mapping GIS, no? But take note, by the wayside, sorry, this is the airstrip that they constructed. This area used to be mangrove ito. But they cut it out to give way for the runway. Not a good idea. Alright? Okay, now, this is how it looked there. Nadiri ba sa Cordova? Have you seen something like this here? Yes. Dire? Exactly like this? Yes. When? Yes. Ha? Tadayas, maugin siya? Remember, you had it only during the first week. Alright? Karon, naapay din siya? Ha? Among gini siya. We went to the area in February 2006. The incident happened in 2005, December. That was almost 2 months later. But we still saw this one. What I'm trying to say is the magnitude of the oil that was collected in the area. Alright? And ito, medyo is a cove. So there is minimal flushing of water due to the incoming high tide and outgoing of the high tide during the low tide. Alright, now, next spill is the solar one that occurred in August 11, 2006. Total volume there estimated is 2 million of the bunker in the tanker. Alright, it affected the province of Guimaras, Iloilo, and even portions of Negros. What was unique and interesting again would be because UBB maintains a biological station in Tacloban Island, where we have our station. So we were also a victim of the spill, hence our important stake into the problem. Alright, this is the tanker resting peacefully under the bottom of the sea at the deeper portion of Guimaras Strait. Okay? Now, during the early phase, the area affected were this area. So this is on the ground zero. This is day 1. Then we have day 2. Then we have day 3. So it spread slowly. Here, I don't know how it spread. I have to reconstruct that well back. No? So you can see the extent of its coverage, not just one municipality. Alright, next please. So in April of 2007, they decided to offload the oil from the sunken vessel for the reason that, although their estimation was that there is already not much of oil left, but there was a technical conference in London by ITO that they deliberated that they should, and what are the pros and cons of removing the oil. And they have decided to remove. One reason, one consideration was that it was on a fault line that had a historical data of a magnitude of 8 na intensity. Alright, magnitude of 8 of earthquake. It's a major earthquake. Should another earthquake of that magnitude will occur, it will cause the breakup of the tanker, releasing the oil. So they did. That's offloading at the cost of around 25 million pesos using a imported Italian company, SunStar. Alright, it was a highly confidential, restricted operation. How much did they recover? Alright, how much did they recover? Less than 9,000 liters only. Meaning to say that the oil that was spilled was really more than 2 million liters of oil. Dire sa Cebu, Pilaman, we go for the maximum, 120 over 2 million. What's the percentage? Roughly was 5%. Okay? Now, so that you can relate already. Next. Okay, this is the view of that. Next. So these are the areas affected. So this is ground zero. This is the heavily affected areas, but it reaches up to this portion. Okay. The next slide will show you, however, a different story. Here, you can see, based on the Landsat image, the GIS overlay, that in the early days of the spill in the August, it was also in August, you can see that ang direction sa oil dinhilan going this. Almost similar pattern what we have right now. But when the wind direction changed in September, because it was not yet removed, the oil started to spread out in various directions. So if the oil is not removed from the tank, from the vessel, we would expect similar scenario here of it spreading all over. We are now closing. This is the last day of August. Tomorrow is September already. So we might have a problem again somewhere here, not just in the February. Alright? It landed also, some portions of that arrived in the coastal area resulting to this. Okay, and last 2 weeks ago we had the one in the Sorry Cavite, and then we have your MV St. Thomas Aquinas oil spill in August 19. If you look at the dates, all of these major spills occurred in August. Right? What is in August? So perhaps we should make a move to declare August as the National Oil Spill Prevention Month. Okay. What were the options, response options? All right. Now, again, response options would be based on the following. One is on the amount of oil. All right. What was the type of oil? The conditions when, where, this will be the basis for the response actions. All right. What were the cleanup strategies that they did? Here, in Semirara Island, use of manual removal, scooping. All right. Nag-scoop pa ka mo dire in the early days? Nag-scooping ba? Wala, no? Wala. Okay. Take note here, daghang kayong tao sa Sud, Mangrove area. This is not recommended. Too much foot traffic will result into dislodging of the oil here and penetrating the lower layer of the soil. That's why we do not recommend too much people working inside, and in fact, no working inside the mangrove. Because we're causing more problem. We know that the intentions are all well-meaning, but at the end of the day, however, it will be causing more damage than good to the area. Okay? Another option that they had was the use of the rice straw. Fortunately, dili kayo is abundant in Cebu. No? So I was suggesting that if we could perhaps get this somewhere outside of Cebu, then we can start making the improvised boom. Kasi there are a lot. They are more absorbent actually, no, than the other materials that are being used. Alright, so another material used was the sorbent pads. Kaya lang, this is a commercial one. It's very expensive. Mahal kayo, no? So we don't really recommend that. And of course, if we have the spill boom, this one is not really an absorbent, but it's a containment boom. It's good enough to contain the oil, but you have to remove it. Alright, here, scooping. Okay, imagine you're not scooping this oil, no, in Semirara, right? At least we don't have it here in Cebu, no, di ba? Ito, another, too much cleaning, aggressive cleaning. If you look at the mangrove tree, kaila ka mo ni? Ano siya rin siya? Sa kwa mo ni? Ha? Bungaw. Bungaw. Yeah, bungalon, alright? Api-api. Scientific name, Abyssinia marina. Look at the roots. These are the aerial roots. Pencil-like pneumatophores. Alright? Natural to. Normal. Di rin itong basura. Alright? In Semirara, they did aggressive clean-up. They removed, they cleaned, including the roots. Alright? So there's an absence of the pneumatophores. And when I saw that, I said, you're not, the oil will not kill the mangroves. The mangroves will not die because of the oil. They will die because you have removed their aerial roots. What's the function? Mangrove soil has a very low oxygen level. Oxygen is only up to the first 2 to 10 centimeter. So, no touch. Alright, this is how they cleaned the shoreline in Guimaras during the early days also. Kaya, balde, pala, alright? Removal of the oil-contaminated beach area. In some cases, it could be something like this. Did any one of you, i-amuni, i-ubra nyo? Wala man? Oh, good. Very good yun. But they had also these improvised booms. Alright. Okay, so they collected, ibutang sa drum. Alright, they transport in sacks. Alright, then it was moved to an area, deposited, and stacked into this area. Take note, walay liner. This was very close to a highly populated area, which was not recommended because this continues to release fumes which might be toxic to the people around. Kasi dili pa kayo decompose ang oil, dili pa kayo weather, na pa siya volatile gyapon, alright? Which would be really toxic, depending on your overall. Now here, the Philippine Coast Guard did some cleanup in Semirara also by spraying, but it is not recommended. Alright? Not recommended. Why? Because dispersants are not supposed to be applied on mangroves. Alright? Although they stop that. Ang window of opportunity ng dispersant is only from 24 to 72 hours after the spill. But more than that, dili na sa pwede. Alright? Mag-disperse. How do we know na there is ineffective dispersal? This is how it looks. Murag gatas ang itsura niya. This is an evidence na there is application of dispersants and ineffective. Alright? So the window niya, kanang fresh pa lang, 24 to 72 hours. You can still disperse. If the water is not shallower or not lower than 30 meters depth. Alright? Shallower, no way. Alright, ito, decollected, stored. Okay? Ito, similar din dito. Ito, problem din. Good that now, they have already identified a collector of the oil debris, because our recommendation then before was to remove this immediately after collection. Don't let this stay in the site of the collection after. Remove it at least within 24 hours so that you minimize the exposure of people who are going to the area from this collected oil debris. Now, shorelines are also protected using improvised boom. In the case of Guimaras, this is something that they did. They used a dayami rice straw enclosed by the absorbent pads. Okay? Ang direct design nyo, you have the stocking, you have the, what you call this? You have your cocoa fiber inside, no? Okay. But I would suggest na medyo bagaan nyo ang inyong boom. Kasi what you have there is only this thick. If you can have much bigger, that would be better. Although it's still palliative. There's another design almost similar here, but what's the difference lang kay kuwan is a rice straw inside. Okay, next. So we tried to do that, but it is not really effective offshore. Alright? It's better only on the shoreline. Next, please. This one, of course, is the ideal to protection on coastline. Unfortunately, the Philippines cannot afford to buy this one. We have a very extensive shoreline. No? A meter of this would be in the order of almost several hundreds of thousands already. No? This one alone, I think, several millions na siya. And we cannot afford that. So we can just do your improvised move. Alright. Do we allow this? Cleanup operation, voluntary work? Definitely no. Alright? If you look at this, sexy pa kayo. Hindi pwede na. Mag-expose yung legs dito. Alright? Ayaw ko na siya, no? And of course, the young kids here, students. We don't allow that. Alright? Health hazard. Okay? Now here, another problem. If just the shoveling of the oil debris back to the sea, but then after placing the oil debris back here, ibalik na sa mode na siya. So balik-balik lang. That's why we really recommend the removal of the oil from the sunken ship. Alright? Otherwise, the threat will always be there. And that our efforts would be futile. Here, next please. Okay, another ginawa kanang manual removal at sea. Okay, enclose a boom, with floating oil, is scoop. Alright, manual removal. Okay, here is the ideal picture of cleanup operation. Look at them properly in proper costume. Okay, here. Kompleto na siya. Well covered ko na siya with post, head to foot na covering ay may gas mask. Kasi medyo, siyempre, dato lagi sila, they have money. Alright? And the amount of oil also. We don't have to go to this extreme. Alright? Kasi hindi man kaya mo nakabaga ang oil. We have alternative suits. There is also a recommended personal protective equipment for our condition. No? I think the Todo has already identified this one. Okay? Ayan, that's the... Okay, next. Now, compare the Philippine style of cleanup in Semirara, in Guimaras. Alright? So again, we don't want a repeat of that here when we do the cleanup. That's why we don't recommend just anybody now just to go there and clean and remove the oil. Alright, now we go now to the second part now on the mangroves itself. No? Now, here in my initial survey in Dayas, I have seen 5 species of mangroves so far, no? Which I think are dominant. We have your Rhizopora picillata or the bakhaw lalaki, alright? Then we have your Abyssinia marina or your bungalon or api-api. Next, we have your Rhizopora mucronata or the bakhaw babae. Then we have your Rhizopora stylosa, which is the bakhaw bato. Alright? Then another species is your pagatpat. It could be within days and weeks only. So we expect to see this one. Yellowing of the leaves, ganun what we call chlorosis, na ay partial to complete defoliation, pagkalagas ng dahon. May naayon sa mga death of individual plants, ganun seedling, saplings of trees. Alright, these are the photos. Now, why is it that mangroves die? One, because of the physical coating of the lenticels. Biology ninyo would say, itong mga lenticels, ganyan mga puti-puti na raised areas, these are the lenticels. These are the entry points of oxygen out and carbon dioxide in for exchange of gases into the plant. Alright? You can see partial coating. Pero pag total coating, wala na yung lenticels dira. Ito, free from the oil. Kita nyo mo, clear kayo. So, murag, butas sa iyong ilong ba? If you plug something here, you cannot breathe properly. Same thing here for the mangroves, physical coating. So the extent of the coating is influential in determining whether the mangroves will eventually die. It's very thick, it may take a while for it to be shredded off. Alright? But we don't also recommend, however, na imo na siyang physical cleanup. Because again, that's more damaging. Now, mangroves will die because of that, no? Because of the physical coating of the oil on the lenticel. On a closer look, kanang clean, mo siyang coated with oil. Alright, consider mo, freshly coating mangroves. Next, why is it that they die? Because of the toxicity, alright, of the oil. Basically, we have the release of the low molecular weight aromatic carbons in the oil that will penetrate and damage the cell membrane of the roots cells, which will eventually impair the ability of the plant to exclude salt. Why? Remember, ang mangroves are unique. They grow in saltwater environment. They take in seawater. Pero, ilang i-retain only ang fresh water. Ilang ipagawas ang salt. But in the event na covering ka ng lenticels, they cannot do that anymore. They lose their ability mapagawas ka ng salt. So, as a itong salt, it will be retained in the cells. Pag daghang kaing salt, o sa'yo magawa, what will happen? Murag sa'yo bulat na isda, nag-shrink. So, it will be toxic. Tara, mamatay na siya. Alright? The same thing will happen with the leaves. That is also responsible for the defoliation of the leaves. So, both increase in the concentration of leaves, of the salt in the leaves, will eventually lead to their defoliation or what we call pagkalaga sa iyang dahon. So, sobra na kayong salt, mag-yellow na siya, may burning pa yellow, then eventually mahulog na iyang dahon. Next. Ito na yung picture na to, kanang yellowing ba. Have you seen this one already happening? I expect this to be happening already here. We are now in the 2 weeks. But be sure lang na itong ina-observe ninyo are really those that were painted by oil. Do not confuse the leaves of Abyssinia marina with chlorosis. Okay? From a distance, the leaves of Abyssinia marina are yellow in color. And of course, if the whole plant, the roots in particular, are coated. Next. Okay, what is ang immediate impact din na kanang partial defoliation? Notice, wala na yung mga dahon nila. Okay, kalalagas na siya. This one occurred within 2 weeks. Alright, heavy oiling, we have seen this also here in the area. Now, in certain cases na mangroves are found within very enclosed coves, there is a high tendency for them to die because of the minimal tidal flushing of the water in and out. Nag-accumulate ka ng oil, and we can see also the sheen coming out over time. This photo was taken in November of 2006, 3 months after the spill. But this was in a relatively secluded cove. On the ground, we can see the dead trees here. Take note, kanang medium-sized ni sila na tree. Second, these are the members of the Rhizopora species. Kanang bakhaw lalaki o bakhaw babae. Dili kayo dominant ang bakhaw bato sa amwa dito because it is not coralline. Dili ang dominant bakhaw bato because coralline ang substrate niya. Hence the name na bakhaw bato kasi it prefers a more rocky substrate. Alright? But if you notice the improvised boom. The mangroves could have been say kung ilang i-remove atong oil. Kaya lang wala man nag-remove ang oil. Ilang ibutangan lang, karang boom. Gibilin na nila. Ay, dapat ilang i-remove ko na siya para na ma-reduce ang toxicity. So that's why na, you just don't place the boom there and leave it there forever without doing anything. If it's a protective boom, protective lang siya bali, absorbing sa de-absorb. But you have to regularly clean them up also. Pag na-contain na siya, you remove them manually as well. Okay? Next. So, ang kuha niyan ay mo sa boom, boom, boom. Right? Another area that we had high mortality. Ito siya, oh. Alright? Now, on the ground, this is how it looked. Medium-sized trees ba sila? Same species ang namatay. Within 3 months of the spill. Alright, within 3 months na siya. One of the highly impacted area. The reason na itong burn sa sulod. Okay, so namatay na siya. Okay, in another island where we checked for the mortality, we have seen it only inside. That's why it's very important ka na aerial survey good na regular. At least, siguro every 3 weeks pa. No? You can have for aerial survey, especially dito na site. Kasi we cannot see the mangroves dying from here. If we simply walk by foot, on foot here or by boat, we can see them kung namatay ito sa suwad bali or hindi. But because we have aerial survey, we're able to check, ay, may namatay ito sa suwad ka sa mangrove. So we have to be careful also. We have to do regular monitoring. The same thing here. Okay. Okay, these are the two work sites affected by the spill. Next. Now, we mapped the area, we computed the area kato namatay ng mga mangrove, and it turned out to be 0.93 hectares only. Only here and on here, and ginagmay na portions dire. With concentrations dire near our marine biological station. Dire lang na po and dire also. It's 0.93 hectares only. Alright? Particularly here, and portions also here, and some here. And it will sum up to less than 1 hectare. If we do simple arithmetic here, we compute total area affected with dead mangroves. It's very simple. 0.92 hectares over the affected area, which was 553 hectares times 100% equals 0.168%. Not much. Alright? Despite all the media hype and all the experts saying that it will be a catastrophe in the Guimaras, this is the value, alright, that we got. Of course, during that time, I was also scared, to be honest. I have never seen that much of oil in my life yet. Now, note that until today, there are no additional areas with Guimaras. In the early days, mga itsura sa oil, sa water, almost similar here perhaps. Okay? You can see the oiling of the trees here. Again, it arrived during high tide. But again, what was important is there is not much of oiling below later. Because stranded oil, we don't have much here, or you don't have much of the beach or sandy, di ba? In this area, dili kay sandy, no? Murang mud lang siya, no? Soft mud. We don't see anywhere something like this. Wala na siya. But it gave us daghan kayo pa na siya even after a month. Alright? The dried oil now combining with the beach soil. Alright, some were trapped, slick. Okay. Next. Okay. Okay, this is how the beach, our beach look in front of our station. Mag-black na siya. It's already on the third week after the spill. Even our only trees of the only species of the only hybrid in mangrove called Rhizophora marquis. This is relatively a rare species. Although recently it has been reported to be quite abundant in Siquijor, no? But elsewhere this is rare species. Luckily, ulit pa. Alright, now here, the oil Rhizophora, even the fruits were affected or were oil because of the simply high tide na taas. Of course, the wildings, now most of the wildings will go when they are oil. Okay, next. Before the spill, after the spill. Now we observe also other effects of the oil spill. And ito din again on a longer period, on a long-term impact. Why? Because of the presence of the persistent oil. Chronic exposure to the persistent oil, which would lead to what we call the sublethal stress. Sublethal, dili siya lethal. So kumbaga, if you are suffering from, if your immune system is damaged, you become more prone to sickness. Alright? But you don't die immediately. Alright? You may or you may not die. Next. Now, symptoms exhibited by the oil mangroves, similar pa rin, nakikita chlorosis, alright? Immediate, long-term, leaf deformities, reduction in the leaf size in flower reproduction. What is the significance of this one? If there is a reduction ka ng iyang size ng leaf, there is reduction in the efficiency of photosynthesis. On sa implication, kung reducing photosynthesis, kamay iyang food production. Maging nutrition deficient ang inyong mangrove. Alright? We have also seen increased insect infestation. Because again, you become more susceptible. And in some cases, there are maybe additional individual trees or even saplings na mamatay. But no longer in a big patch. Individual trees. We did a study on the litter fall. Kanang dahon ba? Among gi-collect na siya. We made this net, no? These are the leaf traps made 1 by 1 meter, placed at different areas, and we collected the leaves here on a monthly basis and sorted them out and weighed in the lab to get the amount of productivity. This is the very first time that we're using this technique in the study of oil mangroves. Alright, the data shows here, now the productivity of mangroves basically is influenced by rainfall and sunlight intensity. Okay? Now, we monitor the monthly fall, litter fall, kanang daghang unsay amount kanang dahon nga kakahulog. Alright.
2008, 2006.
So, if there is too much, then it is an indicator of excessive defoliation, which is a symptom of stress. And our data for the last 6 years was able to capture the trend. Initially, normal pa kayo, didn't be ganun prominent. But in the second year, after the spill, there was so much shedding of the leaves of the trees, which was again an indicator of a long-term stress. Okay? So sige siya hulog yung dahon. But over the years now, from 2006 to 2012, morang nag-stabilize na siya. Indicating periods now, which I think, and I call, the signs of full recovery already. So it takes how many years na siya? At least 4 years. Alright? Now, we did measurements of the leaf sizes. Here, we see that we have seen also that in areas na taas kayong oil, may defoliation ang leaves, ang size niya, nag-reduce by this amount. This is how it looked. There is reduction in the upper canopy. Wala yung dahon dire. Ang nabilin dire na sa lower portion. Awat-awat na wala siya. Okay. We did also further details on the structural changes kung unsay pila lang kabuok ang trees, pila kabuok ang seedlings o saplings. Focus your attention here, October 2006. Mao ni kadaghan ang trees. But 2007, nag-drop na siya. Tapos nag-drop and then nag-start mag-recover on May 2011 here. Approaching already the pre-oil spill level. So this period could be interpreted as the recovery period. Now, here are series of pictures showing you changes in an area that was with mortality of mangroves. 2006, 2007, 2008, 2009, 2010, 2011, 2012. What happened here? Nawala na itong mga mangroves ng Kalamatay, di ba? Nagkalbo na sa dire, murag ibumbahan. Wala na. Alright? Take note that this area, by the way, is very close to a community. Nagkakagbay dito. Alright, this is a barangay. Very close to this mangrove patch. We did also a monitoring in another island here of similar nature ngayon patay dire. Okay, our results show in 2009, we still have the trees left. Kaya mga dead trees na pa dito. But you notice, may mga new seedlings na nagtubo. Na siya. 2010, napagyapon ng mga patay. Pero you see, the new growths are coming in 2010 and 2012.
Wow.
Beautiful, isn't it? Huh? Go back tayo.
Natural lang.
To compare, in one area, 2006, 2012. In another island, 2009, 2012. Tells you two different stories. Ah? Exactly. Why? Why kusog kayong growth dire? Dire walay growth. As I said earlier, kining area is heavily populated. What happened to the trees that died? Gikahoy nila. Doon walang balay. So gikahoy nila. Mat-amat lang. Karon tag-isa lang kaputol. Next day, another putol. Until eventually, madalas 6, nahurot lang kita ng kahoy dire. So wala. There is too much pressure also. Kanang excessive disturbance in the area. Magic here. Right? The pictures don't lie. Okay? Okay, just to show you other, no? Bantigi. Wala. Sa bungwasong poblasyon. In poblasyon, nakamo ito'y bantigi.
Yes.
Sa buwagsong nun. No, I think sa buwagsong, nakakaya sa buwagsong, kay murag naghan yung mga corals ba na dead. So here, sila, sensitive man sila when they are old, pero they're also easy to recover. Kana magbalik yung dahon nila. By the way, for your information, unsay gamit na ning good alternative livelihood. Okay, so tando. Okay, next. Alright, so we have not seen this anymore, no? No, sorry. Now, we did also the analysis. Ito lang sinasabi ko kanina na kailangan nato magkuha ka ng level kitong total petroleum hydrocarbon. Kaya maulagi rin siya ang definitive na indicator sa atong level of petroleum pollution. So, we are using the standard coming from the NOAA. The Philippines doesn't have a standard, but NOAA has. So, according to the NOAA standard, pag clean na siya, less than 1 to 10 milligrams per kilogram. Clean. Kaya we cannot really say na a body of water is really devoid of petroleum hydrocarbon. Why? Parang pareho na sa sigarilyo ba? Or the smoke that you get contains petroleum, polyaromatic hydrocarbon in the form of the benzene ring. Moderate pollution, 10 to 100. But more than 100, extremely polluted, heavily polluted. And in most cases, if we have this level, it is petrogenic. Galing ginasa sa petroleum, dili sa domestic. Kasi in the monitoring of other agencies, they're using oil and grease. Kasi if you look at the Dow Standard 93 with the DNR, it says they're only oil and grease for all waters. Pag oil and grease kasi, it is not sure that it's only petroleum because it contains also oil coming from domestic and vegetable oil can also register for that. So the only way that to be sure na kinangin yung mga shellfish, you mentioned the mayor, katong isda, kung safe dito sa valley, we have to get samples. Pero katong mga fin fishes, probability niya na naitaas ang hydrocarbon mas lower. Pero katong mga shellfishes, there is a high probability. But not yet, I don't see that within these 2 weeks yet. Perhaps a few more weeks. But it is still important na nakakita yung data. No? But BIFAR should be the one to do this. Now, atong tingnan din we will sample sa mangrove area 0 to 2 centimeters from the surface, then 10 to 12 and 20 to 22. Look at the values here. 2007, more than 100 halos na site. But if you look at 2010 below na silang 100. And in fact, by 2011, below na silang 10. So we can really say here na mauna ni siya ang medyo clean. Already safe levels. So karon in yung beach area, I'm sure napala diri nga level. So it's not safe to go there. Standard scientific procedures. Alright? I know people get emotional, especially if their livelihood is already affected. Alright? Other observations. 1. Increase. Ito overtime din. Nagdaghan kayo mga insect infestation. Ito, I guess it's similar to na ang imong immune system nag-reduce. So, naging prone ikaw sa sakit. Pero ito, karon hindi na kayo pronounce na siya. Next, itong interesting. Ano yung albino propagule? Na dili na ko na-anticipate na magawas as one of the long-term impact. I have read this in the latest. Puti sila. Kaya dili puti. Gano man, yellow man sila. Alright? Ano yung tsura? Ano yung normal? Di ba? Ano yung normal na color? Green. Pero mga albino, ano din siya? Na yellow, na orange, na pink. Colorful na kayong mangrove. Diba? Okay? Albino. Albino siya kay wala na siya nag-produce ka na chlorophyll. Ano sa'yo ka? Wala? The builder wala na siya ability to undergo photosynthesis. Kung walang ability ang plants to have photosynthesis, mamatay ang plant. Diba? Okay? So, kana, walang problem. So, here, kana, green, pink, yellow, na siya. Next. At least okay sana, colorful na mga mangrove, no? Pero, release na correct. Okay, may abnormal pagod. Necrotic. Alright, here. Nabuhay man siya. We found one. Nabuhay katong albino na propagule. Kaya albino mga propagule, yung dahon, albino po. Yellow. Dili, normal. Kaya kung normal, green na siya. Karon, kaya wala na siya green pigment na chlorophyll. Ang sabi tabo ka na mamatay. So, tawag yan lethal stress, lethal effect of oil. Mamatay lagi na siya. How I wish it has grown. So, we'll have a new species of mangrove. But it will defy biological principle. Alright? Nga naman, mamatay. It has a food around food. Alright? The next. So, interestingly, dirila doon na siya na area. Not even here can be affected na may namatay ng mangrove. Only here. We try to measure the level of the petroleum hydrocarbon, very low din siya. It's still, we still cannot offer any explanation for the mechanism of the albinism. It's only confirmed that we have albino because I sent the samples to Australia to another colleague also working at the mangroves. And in fact, he said that, yeah, you have the mangroves, the albino. Alright? So it's confirmed. So we still have that much of information. Okay? Then we have also other abnormalities. Anyway, I'm not sure kung due to the oil spill yun Moral. Okay. Next. So here, just to show you some more recent pictures. Ito ang itsura ng 2006, 2000 September, then the picture in 2006 December, but here, 2013. Medyo may clean up din siya bali, pero here, no? You can see. That's why if you go to the area, you would hardly think that the area was once affected by the oil spill. And some people say, asan itong mga oil diri? Well, it's already 6 years. What do you expect? You expect them here? We are not in Alaska, where Exxon Valdez is. In Alaska, until now, the oil is still there. Alright? In the Exxon Valdez oil spill. Why? Cold na to kayo. Oil cannot easily dissipate, cannot evaporate. We are in a tropical country. Evaporation rate, weathering rate is very fast. So you don't expect it to last forever. Alright? Plus all the other factors, alright? So that's why na, really kinakaya na kuhan, no? Alarming, alright, so to speak. And of course, even compared with Guimaras, no? It's very, very low. Alright? Our beach, very clean na siya. Before, ang mga itsura niya, karoon na. Very clean. Of course, perhaps may mga nag-bury, but not much anymore. Okay? So, last 2 slides I will share with you will be our oil spill observation and the major lessons we learned from the Solar One. Number 1 lesson about the LGU local government communities. Limited experience with emergencies. Check?
Yes.
Check. Next. No working familiarity with the National Oil Spill Contingency Plan. Check.
Check.
Next. No technical, logistical capability.
Check.
Check. No preparation during oil spill training.
Check.
Okay. Next. No ready mechanism for immediate response. Check. See? That's why, upon knowing the spill here, I really said, I think they will be doing the same thing. Lucky you are here because within the next 2 weeks, first week pa lang of the spill, we're able to remedy the situation na. Alright, to rectify. Because we don't want you to repeat what we had in Solar One in Guimaras. You know, in Guimaras, ang ganitong time, it was very chaotic. Very, very chaotic yun. Grabe ka-chaotic. No? But here, everything is systematic. The mayor is very systematic, very organized. I'm very happy for that. Even to the provincial level. No? Next, another. Political pressure from an angry public. What do we mean here? Do something, anything. Correct?
Yes.
Nah. When you should not be doing something. Okay? Many critics and overnight experts. Na experts mag-advise na kung gamit ka ng material for absorption. Ganito. Alright? Sa Guimaras, same thing. Nakakang experts. Local, national, international po. No? Next. And much of the haphazard response by the victims themselves and even the well-meaning volunteers and officials. Mga sa bali na kami, we really want to straighten these things out, right? In a more systematic manner. Okay? But of course, we have seen it already na effective management dito. Okay? And I would like to congratulate you, but still, there is still a lot to learn from this. So with that, I end my talk and thank you very much for listening.